I still remember the exact smell of that notebook, like old paper, and something floral. Something soft and powdery, like the inside of a drawer that's been closed for years. Something that didn't belong in a house like hers. I found it on a Tuesday. A cold, gray Tuesday in November, when the kind of quiet in a house feels less like peace and more like something holding its breath. The light coming through the guest room window was that flat, pale light you only get in late autumn. Like the sun is apologizing for still being there. I remember every detail of that room. The way the bedspread was slightly crooked. The half-empty glass of water on the nightstand with the small lipstick mark on the rim. The book lying face down, spine cracked, the way Carol always left her books, and that always quietly bothered me. I remember all of it, because your brain does that when something is about to change. It takes a photograph. My name is Renata, and what I'm about to tell you, I've never said out loud, not to my sister, not to my therapist, not to anyone who knows the full shape of my life. But I need to say it now, because carrying this alone, it's been like walking around with a stone sewn into my chest, and I'm tired of the weight of it. My husband, Daniel, and I had been married for 6 years when everything unraveled. 6 years. Long enough to stop noticing each other. Long enough to build a life that looked beautiful from the outside, but felt sometimes like a stage set. Like if you pushed on the wall, it would wobble. We had a daughter, Maeve, 4 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs and orange juice. We had a house in a suburb that smelled like fresh-cut grass in summer. We had Sunday dinners. We had a life. What we didn't have was easy to ignore. Until it wasn't. His mother, Carol, I don't know how to describe Carol without sounding like I'm just venting. Because I'm not. I genuinely want to be fair to her. She deserves that, given how this story ends. She was a woman who had survived things. I knew that much. Her husband, Daniel's father, had left when Daniel was 11. Just left. No big fight. No dramatic exit. He just stopped coming home one day, and eventually it became permanent. Daniel talked about it sometimes in that detached way people talk about wounds that never fully closed. Carol had raised Daniel alone after that. Worked 2 jobs for a while. Kept the house. Kept showing up. And I think that shaped something in her she never let anyone see directly. She was warm on the surface. Charming, even. She brought casseroles when Maeve was born and stayed for a week and did the laundry without being asked. She sent birthday cards with handwritten notes inside. She remembered small things, the kind that make you feel seen, but there was always something underneath it. Something watchful. Something that felt like a woman who had learned long ago that the people you love can surprise you in the worst possible ways. And so she watched. She held her cards close. I used to find it exhausting. Looking back now, I understand it. Daniel and I had been going through a rough stretch. Nothing catastrophic, or so I thought. Just the slow erosion that happens when 2 people stop choosing each other every day and start coexisting instead. He worked long hours. A project manager at a construction firm. Always a deadline. Always a crisis. I worked from home doing freelance graphic design, which sounded flexible but just meant I was always available for everything. Every appointment. Every sick day. Every domestic puzzle. I was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. He was distant in a way that presence doesn't fix. We were polite. We said please and thank you. We talked about schedules and grocery lists. We were roommates who shared a bed and a daughter. We'd had one big argument in September, about 2 months before I found the notebook. It was over something stupid. I honestly don't even remember what started it, but it cracked something open. Things were said that don't unring. I told him I felt invisible. He told me I made everything feel like a performance review, and for those 2 months, we'd been circling each other carefully. Like 2 people navigating a room full of glass. Carol, of course, noticed. She always noticed. She'd come to stay with us for a week in November. Her apartment was being repainted, she said. Just a week, she said. It stretched to 9 days. I didn't mind, honestly. She was helpful with Maeve. She cooked dinners that Daniel actually ate with enthusiasm, which was more than I could say for mine lately. And she gave me something useful to do, playing hostess, which kept me from sitting too long in the silence between me and my husband. She slept in the guest room at the end of the hall. On the 8th day, she left early in the morning to meet an old friend for lunch. She was going to be gone for hours. Daniel was at work, Maeve was at preschool, and I was home alone, cleaning. I was changing the guest room sheets. I don't know why. I'm that person. The person who cleans obsessively when things feel out of control. It's not a virtue. It's just something my body does when my mind is too loud. I stripped the bed. I was gathering the loose items from the nightstand to wipe it down. A glass of water, a small lamp, a book she'd been reading, and when I knocked something off the back edge, I heard it land behind the nightstand with a soft thud. I moved the nightstand out from the wall, and there it was. A notebook. Small, spiral-bound. Dark. Green cover with a small yellow flower sticker. On the bottom corner that was starting to peel. Figured it had slipped back there by accident. I figured I'd just put it back with her things, and she'd never know it had fallen. I picked it up, I set it on the bed. Should have walked out of the room. I don't know why I didn't. Something stopped me, I don't have a rational explanation for it. Call it instinct. Call it a bad feeling that had no name yet. I sat down on the edge of the stripped mattress, and I opened it. The first few pages were nothing. Shopping lists. A phone number. A reminder about a dental appointment. I exhaled. See? Nothing. Just a regular person's notebook. I started to close it. And then I saw my name, written in her handwriting. In the middle of the page, no context, just Renata doesn't know. I stopped breathing. I don't mean that as an expression. I genuinely forgot to breathe for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Renata doesn't know. Know what? I turned the page. The next entry was dated 3 weeks earlier. She wrote in this looping cursive that was hard to read in places. I had to go slowly. Had to tilt the page toward the window light. She wrote about a phone call with Daniel. I shouldn't be keeping this, she wrote. But I have to write it down somewhere. I have to get it out. He called me crying tonight. I haven't heard him cry like that since he was a boy. He said he doesn't know how to keep going. He said he loves Renata, but he doesn't know if he's in love with her anymore. He said there's someone else. That it only happened twice. That it was over. That he ended it. He begged me not to say anything. I told him he had to tell her himself. He said he would. That was 3 weeks ago. I sat there for a long time. The notebook was open in my lap. The room was completely quiet. Outside, somewhere down the street, I could hear a dog barking. A car passed. Someone's wind chime made a sound. The whole world just kept going, completely indifferent to the fact that mine had just stopped. And I just sat there. Because the strange thing, the thing that still confuses me when I think back on it, is that I wasn't screaming on the inside. I wasn't falling apart. There were no tears. No hyperventilating. No dramatic moment of collapse. I was just very, very still. Like the part of me that was supposed to react had quietly excused itself from the room and left only this strange, clear, cold version of me behind, a version of me I'd never met before. She was not panicking. She was watching. She was thinking. I kept reading. I know I shouldn't have. I know that. But I couldn't stop. It felt like trying not to breathe. Technically possible, but not for long. 2 pages later, another entry. She was writing about guilt. About feeling caught between her son and her daughter-in-law. She wrote about Maeve, how she worried about Maeve, and something in that made me feel briefly like she was on my side. But then there was an entry from 5 days ago, and this one was different. She wrote, I ran into Celeste at the pharmacy today. I stood there and I smiled at her like nothing had happened. Like I don't know what she did. What they did. She had the nerve to ask how Renata was doing. I wanted to say something. I almost did. But then I thought about Daniel and Maeve and what falling apart would cost all of them, so I smiled. I said Renata was wonderful, and I drove home and sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could make myself go. Inside Celeste. Her name is Celeste, and then, a few lines down, the worst part isn't even what happened. The worst part is that Renata thinks Celeste is her friend. Celeste. My Celeste. Celeste, who had been my closest friend for 4 years. Who I'd met in a mommy and me class when our girls were the same age. Whose daughter, Piper, was Maeve's best friend. Celeste, who had been to my house for dinners. Who had texted me that very morning a meme about the cold weather. Celeste. I closed the notebook. I sat there on that bare mattress and I looked at the wall. There's a moment. I think in every real betrayal, not the movie kind, but the real kind, where you have to take what you now know and map it backwards over everything you thought you knew. The remapping is almost the worst part, because it's not just one image that changes. It's hundreds of them. The brunch in July where Celeste had asked me so gently how things were at home, how Daniel and I were doing. I had thought she was being a good friend. I had opened up to her. I had told her things that were real and private and tender, all the dinners, all the easy laughter around our table, all the times she'd been in the same room as Daniel and I had noticed, vaguely that they were comfortable with each other, and had thought, how nice. The birthday party last spring where I'd had too much wine and gone to bed early and they'd stayed up on the back deck. I'd looked out the window before I fell asleep, their silhouettes in the patio light, talking easily. I had thought how lovely. My favorite people and the group chat, where I'd complained about Daniel, where she had said all the right sympathetic things, all of it was suddenly in a different light, and it looked terrible in that light. I put the notebook back exactly where I'd found it. I remade the bed. I went downstairs. I made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink. Sat at the kitchen table and I waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for. I think I was waiting for myself to fall apart, but I didn't. I just thought. Here's the thing about me that you need to understand. I'm not an impulsive person. I never have been. When I'm hurt, I don't cry right away. I go quiet. I go cold. I process for a long time, sometimes days, and then I decide what I'm going to do. And something about finding that notebook and something about reading. Carol's handwriting had flipped a switch in me that I hadn't known existed. I wasn't devastated. I was decided. I thought about confronting Daniel that night. I ran through it in my head. The tears, the apologies, the explanations, the promises it would never happen again. I thought about how it would go, and I thought about Maeve, 4 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs and orange juice. I thought about what she deserved. Not a mother who stayed in a broken marriage out of fear. Not a mother who quietly accepted humiliation and called it keeping the family together, but also not a mother who blew everything up in a rage before she had all the facts. I needed to know more. I needed to be sure. And I needed to do this right. I had 3 days. Carol was leaving in 3 days. Daniel was home every evening. And Celeste had texted me that morning about getting coffee that week. I texted her back. I said, yes, Thursday? Can't wait to see you. She sent back a heart emoji. I set my phone down. That night, I watched Daniel across the dinner table. Carol had made pasta. Something with a cream sauce that filled the kitchen with warmth. Maeve was telling a long, incomprehensible story about something that happened at preschool involving a crayon and someone named Brody. I watched Daniel laugh at the crayon story. Really laugh. That genuine laugh with the crinkled eyes. I watched him pass Carol the bread. I watched him ask Maeve follow-up questions about Brody with complete sincerity. I watched him be so normal. So completely, convincingly normal, and I thought, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been sitting at this table, laughing at our daughter's stories, sleeping next to me, passing the bread, and carrying this? I almost asked him, right there at the table, but Maeve was there, so I didn't. After dinner, I did the dishes. Daniel dried. We worked next to each other in that comfortable silence we'd built over years, and I kept waiting to feel something erupt in me. But it was just that same cold clarity, just that watching. That night in bed, he fell asleep quickly. He always does. It's one of the things that used to make me jealous. That easy way he dropped into sleep while I lay there with a busy brain. I lay there in the dark. I listened to him breathe. And something shifted in me. Not anger. Not grief. Something colder than both of those. It felt like clarity. The next morning, Carol was making coffee in the kitchen when I came downstairs. She turned and smiled at me. She had no idea I knew. And I looked at her. This woman I had privately rolled my eyes at for 6 years. This woman who brought casseroles and kept score. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Felt something close to gratitude because she had written it down, because some part of her hadn't been able to just carry it. alone. Because whether she'd intended it or not, she had handed me the truth. "Good morning," she said, and poured me a cup of coffee. "Good morning," I said, and I sat down and I drank it, and I was perfectly calm. Wednesday. One day before the coffee with Celeste, I spent the morning working from home, normal as anything. But in the afternoon, while Maeve napped, I did something I'm not proud of. I looked through Daniel's phone. I know, but I needed to be sure. I needed to know that what I'd read in that notebook wasn't old news. I needed to know it was really over, and I found nothing obvious. No text to Celeste. No hidden apps. But then I checked the deleted photos folder. There was one photo, taken 6 weeks ago. It was a photo of a note, handwritten, her handwriting. I recognized it now because I'd seen it in texts she'd sent our group chat. It said, "I know you said it's over. I'm not going to push, but I need you to know it meant something to me. Both times. And I'll always care about you 6 weeks ago, right?" Around the time Daniel had called his mother, crying. I sat with Maeve while she woke up and ate her snack. I watched her eat crackers and talk to her plastic triceratops. I thought, she is the most innocent thing in this whole terrible story. And I thought, will not let any of this touch her more than it has to. I met Celeste at the coffee shop on Thursday morning. She was already there when I arrived. She had ordered my usual, an oat milk latte, which she knew by heart because she'd probably ordered it for me 100 times over 4 years of friendship. She was wearing a yellow sweater. She looked bright and warm and like someone you would trust immediately if you didn't know better. She smiled when she saw me come through the door, waved. That easy. Open wave, and I thought, she doesn't know. She doesn't know I know. I sat down across from her. She said, "You look tired. Are you okay?" I said, "I've had a weird week." She nodded sympathetically. "Tell me about it," she said. "What's going on?" I looked at her face. I had known this face for 4 years. I had laughed with this face until I cried. I had cried with this face until I laughed. I had sat in this exact coffee shop with this face dozens of times and shared things I hadn't shared with anyone else. I had trusted this face. And she was looking at me right now with such genuine seeming concern. And I thought, you are very, very good at this. Or maybe you actually do feel bad. Maybe both things are true at once. Maybe you actually are my friend and you also did this terrible thing. I've thought about that a lot since. How people can hold two completely contradictory truths inside themselves and not even see the contradiction. I said, "Can I ask you something?" She said, "Of course, anything." I said, "How long?" She froze, just for a moment, just for one small, almost imperceptible flicker of a moment before she rearranged her expression back into something neutral. But I saw it. I saw the freeze. "What do you mean?" she said. "Celeste," I said it quietly. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't crying. I was looking at her with that same cold clarity that had been living inside me since Tuesday. "I know," I said. "I just need to hear it from you." She looked down at the table, and then she looked back up at me, and I saw the exact moment she decided not to lie. The silence between us stretched. Something shifted in her face. The performance of normalcy just fell away, like a curtain dropping, and what was underneath it looked like a person who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. And I knew, even before she said a single word, I knew. She said it was twice. She said the first time had been in August. That it happened after they'd both been going through hard things and had been talking, and it had just happened, I said flatly. She flinched. She said the second time was 3 weeks later and she had ended it after that. She said she was so sorry. She said they both felt terrible. She said it was over. She said, "I'm so sorry, Renata. I am so, so sorry. I listened to all of it. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I held my coffee cup and let it warm my palms. And when she finished talking, I set it down and I said, I believe that you feel sorry, but I need you to understand something. What you did with my husband in my marriage while sitting at my dinner table and texting me heart emojis and asking me how things were at home while you already knew, that's something I will never forgive you for, not because I'm not capable of forgiveness. I am, but because you were my friend. You weren't a stranger who didn't owe me anything. You knew me. You chose me as a friend. You sat with me and you listened to me talk about my marriage, about the hard parts, and you filed those things away, and then you chose him anyway. That's what I can't forgive, not the act, the choice, the specific knowing, eyes open choice. As she cried, I watched her cry, and I felt almost nothing, which scared me more than the anger would have. I left the coffee shop. I sat in my car, and then I called my sister. I need a lawyer, I said. She said, Renata, what happened? I said, I'll explain everything. But right now, I just need you to help me find a family lawyer. There was a pause, and then she said, okay, I'm on it. I didn't confront Daniel that night. Or the next. Carol left on Friday morning. I drove her to the train station. We hugged goodbye in the parking lot. She said, thank you for having me. You're a good woman, Renata. I looked at her. I said, thank you for staying. And I meant it. In the strangest, most complicated way, I meant it. She called me 2 days later. I was sitting in my car in the preschool parking lot. Waiting for dismissal, she said, Renata, I need to tell you something. I said, I already know, Carol. A long silence. How? She said, your notebook fell behind the nightstand. I found it when I changed the sheets. Another silence, then so quietly, I'm sorry. I should have told you myself. I didn't know how. I know, I said. What are you going to do? I looked out through the windshield at the little kids streaming out of the preschool doors, their backpacks huge on their small bodies. I'm going to be okay, I said. And I'm going to make sure Maeve is okay. And Daniel? That's between me and Daniel. I told him on a Sunday evening. Maeve was at my sister's house for a sleepover, something I'd arranged quietly, telling my sister only that I needed a night, that I'd explain later. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like it has weight. We were sitting in the living room, and I said, I need to talk to you about Celeste. I watched his face. I watched the color drain out of it. I will not describe what happened next in detail, not because it wasn't significant, but because some things belong only to the people in the room. He cried. He didn't deny it. He said he'd been lost. He said he'd been scared of what we were becoming, and instead of turning toward me, he had turned away. He said Celeste had been there at a moment when he hadn't known how to find me. He said he knew that wasn't an excuse. He said he'd ended it because he didn't want to lose the family we'd built. He said, I should have told you. I was going to. I kept almost telling you. I said, but you didn't. He said, no, I was afraid. I said, afraid of what? He said, of this. I looked at him for a long moment. This person I had built a life with. This person whose face I knew so completely I could draw it in the dark. I said, I've been to see a lawyer. The silence that followed was long. I'm not making any decisions tonight, I said. But I need you to know that from this point forward, everything is different. Whether we stay or go, we don't get to go back to pretending. He nodded. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, I said, and we sat there in the quiet of the life we'd built, not together. Not quite separate yet, just in the in-between. Being in the in-between is one of the strangest feelings I've ever had, knowing that the thing you had is over, but the new thing hasn't started yet. You're standing in the middle of the burning bridge, and somehow you have to stay on it long enough to figure out where to go next. I spent a lot of time, in the weeks that followed, thinking about Carol's notebook, about how strange it is that the truth can live in something so ordinary. A spiral-bound notebook with a peeling flower sticker, bought probably at a drugstore, carried in a purse, written in during quiet moments. She hadn't meant for me to find it, but she had written down the thing that was burning her, because that's what people do with things that are too heavy to just carry. They write them down. They put them somewhere outside themselves, and sometimes someone finds them. I'm not going to tell you that everything worked out neatly. Life isn't neat. I'm not going to tell you Daniel and I rebuilt everything, and now we're stronger than ever, because that would be dishonest. The truth is more complicated. The truth is that we tried. We went to therapy, both together and separately. We had conversations that were brutally honest and deeply uncomfortable. We sat with a lot of silence, and after about 4 months of trying, I asked for the separation, not in anger, not dramatically. I sat across from him at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning after Maeve had gone to school, and I said, "I don't think I can do this." "I thought I could, but I can't." He said, "I know." He said it quietly, like he'd been waiting for that too. The divorce was not ugly. That surprised people. I think they expected fireworks, screaming, lawyers firing missiles at each other, but we were too tired for that. And more importantly, we both loved Maeve enough to refuse to turn her into collateral damage. We divided things carefully. We created a schedule that put Maeve first. We were, and I say this without bitterness, genuinely decent to each other, because at the end of it all, at the end of the anger and the grief and the long dark nights of figuring out who you are without the life you'd built, he was still Maeve's father, and I wasn't going to take that from her. Celeste and I have not spoken since the coffee shop. Her daughter, Piper, and Maeve stayed friends for a while. We managed drop-offs and pickups with a politeness that must have been exhausting to everyone around us. But eventually, the girls drifted apart naturally, as kids do. I heard through someone that Celeste moved to a different neighborhood. I hope she's well. I mean that. Not warmly. Not the way you hope for someone you love, but I hope she's well, because I'm not carrying hatred for her either. It was too heavy. Carol and I, this is the part that surprises people most. Carol and I are close. Closer, honestly, than we were when I was married to her son. She calls me every Sunday. She comes to see Maeve every few weeks. I think what happened, what she did, even accidentally, created something between us. An honesty, a seeing of each other. She said to me once over the phone, maybe 6 months after everything, "I always liked you, Renata, but I didn't always know how to show it. The in-law thing, I had a lot of walls." I said, "I know. I had some too." "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she said. "I was afraid of what it would do." "It did what it was always going to do," I said. "It just did it on my schedule." That was the gift, actually. A long pause. "That's a very generous way to look at it," she said. "I've had a lot of time to think," I told her. "My life now is small and mine in a way it wasn't before. I have an apartment I love. 3rd floor of an old brick building with high ceilings and creaky floors and radiators that clank in winter in a way that annoyed me for 2 weeks, and then became comforting. The windows face east, so I wake up with light, on the good mornings. It comes through the curtains and long golden bars and lands on the kitchen floor, and I make coffee and stand there in it and think, this is mine. Everything in this apartment, I chose. The rug, the paint color, the slightly too big reading chair that I bought because I loved it and for no other reason. Maeve has a drawer full of dinosaurs there, and a dinosaur poster above her bed that she chose herself. A full wall, a T-Rex mid-roar that startled me every night for a week before it stopped. I work from that apartment and I have a life shaped by my own choices. It's not perfect there. Are nights when the quiet is lonely rather than peaceful. Mornings when Maeve is at Daniel's and the apartment is too still. Moments when I see a couple laughing at some private joke and I feel a pang of something I can't quite name. But it's grief. Not regret. Grief is for the thing that was real and is gone. Regret is for a choice you wish you'd made differently. I have grief. I don't have regret. I started running in the mornings, somewhere in the middle of all of it. I just started lacing up shoes and going outside before the world woke up. Before Maeve woke up. Before the day had any shape yet. There is something about moving through a quiet neighborhood before dawn that is very good for certain kinds of pain. You're alone with it. But you're moving, just keep moving. A few months ago, I was cleaning out a box from the move. In the bottom, I found a small spiral-bound notebook I'd bought years ago and never used. I sat down with it. I opened to the first page, and I thought about Carol's notebook. About the truth living in ordinary things. About how she'd written down the thing that was too heavy. I picked up a pen. I wrote, "I am Renata." This is the beginning of the part where I figure out who that is. I don't know why I'm telling you all of this. Maybe because the story has been living inside me for too long. Maybe because there are other people out there who have walked into a quiet room and found something that changed everything. And if you're one of them, I want you to know, the thing you found wasn't the catastrophe. The catastrophe was already there, moving quietly in the dark. What you found was the light switch, and yes, it's terrifying to see clearly, but it is so much better than not seeing it all. I still think about that notebook sometimes, that small green spiral notebook with the peeling flower sticker. I think about Carol buying it somewhere, a pharmacy, probably. The kind with the bright fluorescent lights and the aisles of greeting cards, not knowing what it would become, not knowing that the words she wrote inside it, in her looping cursive, in her private guilt-stricken honesty, would one day find their way to the person who needed them most. I think about that, and I think, the truth always finds a way. It's patient. It doesn't rush, but it always, eventually finds a way. Maeve turned 6 last month. She had a dinosaur party. Of course she did. We held it at the park near the apartment. The cake was shaped like a T-Rex. Green frosting, tiny fondant claws, a roaring expression that Maeve described as friendly, but also a little scary, like when Grandma Carol does her serious face, which made everyone laugh, including Carol. Daniel was there. And his girlfriend, someone new, someone I have no real feelings about in either direction, which I consider a personal victory. She was quiet and kind and clearly fond of Maeve, which was the only metric that mattered. Carol was there in a bright blue cardigan, playing with dinosaur figurines at the craft table with the same enthusiasm as the 6-year-olds. My sister was there, and I stood in the middle of all of it. This complicated, reconfigured, imperfect collection of people who love this child. And I thought, this is enough. This is actually enough. We sang Happy Birthday. Maeve squeezed her eyes shut so tight, fists clenched. Like the wish required her whole body. She wished for a long time, and when she blew out the candles in one go, everyone cheered, and she threw her arms up, and she looked right at me with this enormous, unguarded, completely joyful grin. She said, "Did I get it, Mama? Do you think I got it?" I looked at my daughter. I said, "I think you got it, baby," and I meant it in every possible way. That night, after she was in bed and the apartment was quiet, I stood in the kitchen, thinking about those squeezed shut eyes. That wish, and I thought, she's not living in a shadow, she's living in a full pack of dinosaurs on a shelf above her bed. She's living in the version of childhood where the adults around her were honest enough to give her something real. If you asked me today whether I'm happy, I'd have to think about it, not because I'm sad, but because happy is a complicated word. I'm present, I'm honest, I'm mine, and I'm raising a little girl who will grow up, knowing that her mother chose truth over comfort, chose clarity over a beautiful lie. That's what I want her to know, not that her parents' marriage failed, but that her mother, when given the choice between pretending and knowing, chose to know every time. I still have that small notebook I started. I write in it sometimes. Not every day. Just when something is too heavy to carry alone. I think Carol would understand that. That's the story. That's all of it. Tuesday in November. A green notebook with a peeling flower sticker, a woman sitting on a stripped mattress, and a life that, from that moment forward, was never going to be the same. I don't have any grand conclusion for you. Life doesn't give you those. It just keeps going. And so do you. So do you.